Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of The Company by KJ Parker. I'm going to make this one a quick one even though there is so much to unpack and so much to talk about. Mainly because I feel like if you've been watching my channel at all in the last couple of months, you will definitely have seen a very common theme, which is that he's just become a favourite author of mine. And I feel like my reviews of his are starting to get a little bit repetitive because they're all just so good. But that being said, I'm still going to keep reviewing his books because they do tackle different things. The characters do tend to be quite different, but I'm going to make this one maybe a little bit shorter than say some of my other KJ Parker reviews. So without further ado, I am going to jump into what this book is about. In this book, we follow a cast of 5 characters. It is multi-POV, not as multi-POV as say Sharps. We do get the perspective of other characters, but we are mainly following the story from the main character, who goes by the name of Kunessun. The plot centers around Kunessun, who is essentially trying to get the band back together to go and create a new society on this remote island. We don't really know why. At the beginning of the book, we just get this picture of this ex-military leader. He has come back to his town, his hometown, after many years of not being there, and he's getting the team back together, essentially. And that's where we start. Throughout the progression of the book, I'm not going to go into that into detail, but we essentially follow the trials and tribulations of these characters as they try to set up this new society. And we also get flashbacks and vignettes of what was happening to these men pre their eventual splitting up. I'm going to go into now what I liked about the book. I loved so many things about this book. So from what I understand, and I was talking to Alan about this book is the first standalone that KJ Parker wrote, and that blows my mind. This is probably got to be one of my favorite Parker books that I've read thus far. It is so bleak. It is so dark, and this to me is real grimdark. Like, the setting is incredibly unforgiving. There is very little hope, and even when this gang comes back together, you still kind of question whether that's actually a good thing. And everything has consequences. Everything feels like it's just on the precipice of like collapsing, but you don't know why. And that's what Parker does so well. He creates this sense of tension. He creates this very atmospheric read, and you never lose that at any point in the book. I think it's something that he does exceptionally well, more so than any other author that I have read at this point in time. And that is extremely impressive, to be able to create that extremely tense and atmospheric setting. And it was chef's kiss, honestly. It was chef's kiss. I'm blown away by the fact that this was his first book. The thing that it does make me think of, and I also mentioned this to Alan when we were doing that debrief after we both finished it, is that I feel like this is his darkest book that we've read so far. And given that it was his first one, I did kind of wonder whether his publisher asked him to tone it down, because in his other book, there is humour to counteract some of that darkness. It's very reminiscent of kind of what Abercrombie does, which I really like. But there is very little humour in this book. It's just bleak. It's just dark. Genuinely, after I finished it, I had to watch something funny because I was also reading another really dark book alongside it, and I don't recommend doing that because it's just so depressing. It's so depressing. But I loved it. I was here for it. The setting is amazing. If you like grimdark or you want to read more darker fantasy and you don't want to have to commit to a big mammoth series, read it. It's phenomenal. The second thing that I really, really liked, obviously, is the character work that he does. I'm only going to talk about 2 characters in this book, and then I'll mention the female character work as well, as I always do in Parker's books. The main character, Kunessun, Tuish Kunessun, is, he is just so well realised. He is on another level when it comes to dark, morally grey characters. I don't think Kunessun is morally grey. I think he's just evil, and he's just human evil. Like, he's not even a villain necessarily. He's just a bad person. He's just a horrible person. He's motivated by revenge. He's motivated by satiating this need for justice in his own mind, and he is just awful. There are multiple scenes in this book where you read it and you have to stop reading because you really wonder whether a human being is capable of doing that level of behavior and that level of emotional manipulation. It's just, oh, it's actually quite scary to read. This book reads more as a horror. So if you like horror books, read this book. And it's because of the characters. It's because the characters do things that are not even questionable. They're just wrong. But they are justified in their own mind as to why they should be doing that thing. And they're going ahead and doing it because they're justified, which is understandable. But the fact that they even justify it in their head in the first place is just, oh, it's just so good. It is just amazing. Like, I can't describe, really, I really can't describe how good his character work is in this book. And Knesson, you could do a whole video on Knesson. And Knesson is just, he's just so insidious. And you just want to psychoanalyze him and deconstruct why he is the way that he is. And I have my theories that I'm not necessarily going to mention in this video because I don't want to spoil it, because you should experience this character for yourself. But just take my word for it. He is evil. He is unapologetic about the fact that he's evil. And the way that he just switches from being there for his men, but then just very quickly switches into being this dark character is just fascinating. He's kind of sociopathic, but kind of here for it as well. I loved reading it. The second character that I will mention is AD. AD is, I'm not going to try and say his second name, I don't know, Proapsin, I don't know, but I'll comment it in. AD's great. AD to me is kind of like a classic KJ Parker character. He's super smart, super intelligent. Kind of everybody relies on him to get the job done and just kind of organize everything. And he's fantastic. AD is my type of character. He's the type of character that I love because I love intelligent characters that are morally questionable. And AD is definitely morally questionable. He does stuff throughout the book where you're like, why are you doing that? That doesn't seem right. It's so good. AD contrasting with Knesson, their relationship is really interesting. You definitely see them bat heads multiple times. And I love their interactions. Some of their interactions are the most telling. And you can definitely see these two very smart people batting heads. And I love seeing smart characters kind of lock heads with each other. And I think Parker, again, showed a really interesting dynamic between these two characters that are so different but also very similar in certain ways. The last thing I will mention on characters, and there's so many other characters that I want to mention, actually there's one other one, Murray's a great character as well, and the reason why is because he's the complete antithesis of Knesson. Murray is the one that kind of speaks all the time but nobody really listens to him. His wife makes a really interesting observation and Knesson kind of doesn't fully acknowledge it, which is interesting in itself. But Murray is kind of maybe the closest that you can get to being a moral center in this book, and he is the one that they don't listen to him, and that actually ends up being quite a bad mistake on their part. I'm not going to go into any more than that because you should just read it to find out. And then the last thing I will mention on characters is just the relationship between the women in this book and the men. It's really interesting because in this one you do get a lot more of the role of women in this book. And I actually really like the way that it was done. The interesting thing is that before these men go to the island that they're going to essentially colonize, they realize that they need to actually have women on the island because they obviously need to be able to populate it. There's this whole kind of undercurrent of like treatment of women. You know, there's one point where one of the characters realizes that he doesn't actually know the names of any of the women on the island, and then he doesn't even go further to acknowledge that. He just says, oh, I should probably know the names, and then just like moves on. And the fact that the women are literally just reduced to just being there because of the fact that they are women and they can birth children is fascinating. And you see it in multiple kind of interactions, and they're just seen there really as a tool for the men to use as a way to breed. They're very much relegated to second place in the society. And then you have the indentured men, who are the lower classes of the society, who are essentially there to kind of help them do manual labor. The way they talk about them is just disgusting. They don't have any rights. And there's this one really interesting point in the book where a discovery is made on the island, and it is made by the indentured men, and they are not given a fair deal. They are very much cheated out of what they should be getting. And I just think it's a really interesting commentary on the role of women and essentially the working class man, which I find really interesting. I just realized this review is going on actually quite a lot, so I guess we're going for a full review and not a short one, like I said. The other thing that I will mention is obviously the thematic work. I've said this many times and I will say it many times again, I'm sure. Parker's books, Parker's speciality is being able to weave in different themes very subtly into his writing, and it is masterfully done, and this is no exception. We obviously get themes of friendship and loyalty, and I mentioned kind of revenge earlier, doing what is right, morality, you know, there's just so much to unpack in this book. And there's like things around family dynamics, there's things around knowing your place, knowing your identity, knowing who you are, and never really being able to give up old parts of yourself. There's other things around living up to expectations, other people's expectations, your own expectations, and oh, it's just so good. The thing about Parker is that his works all feel the same. They do tend to cover similar things, but they are seen through very different lenses, and I love it. Love it. I'm here for it, and it's just perfection. Honestly, it's just perfection. The last thing that I will mention that I loved is just how there's this general, you know, as the reader, you question whether the things that are being presented to us are really honest. And I think Kunesson, I think all of these characters are not particularly reliable narrators when you do get their perspective. There's something that is done, especially in this book, compared to, say, Parker's other works, where Kunesson in particular, he remembers certain events in very different ways to the way they actually happened. And so you question whether his motivations are really actually that valid, because he's thinking about it, he's remembering it in a way that when you see it from the other character's perspective, is just, it's told and recounted in a very different way. So we're seeing things through rose-tinted glasses, and you really in your own mind wonder whether he's remembering it correctly, and you definitely do question that throughout. All right, I'm gonna go on to what might not work for other people, because this book was a perfect book for me. You know, I think it's very obvious that I gave this like 10 stars, right? So what I don't think will work for other people, this book is super dark. I don't think it's for the light-hearted by any means. If you're not sure whether you'll like Grimdark, don't read this book. I've read quite a lot of Grimdark now, and this has got to be one of the darkest books that I've read. Not necessarily in the violent sense. Like I said, it reads like a horror, like a psychological horror, and you really feel that. Like I remember when I was reading it, I said to Alan, I was like, I don't actually think this is that good for my mental health at the moment, especially because I was reading this other really dark book. I'm glad I pushed through with it because it's incredible and the character work is incredible, but it's really sinister. Like it feels very, I don't know what the word is, like it almost feels quite oppressive as you're reading it, because, and I don't know if oppressive is the right word, so bear with me. I'm filming this early in the morning. It just feels like you're a bit off balance as you're reading it, because something doesn't feel right when you're reading it. And that's what makes it special. So if you don't like the sound of that, definitely don't read it. And if you're also a beginner to Parker, if you've only read one of his books or two of his books, or you haven't read any of his books yet, I would also put this off towards the end. And I'm kind of glad that we decided to read this one kind of at the tail end of his standalones, because oh man, it's just brutal. It's absolutely brutal, and I don't think that's going to be for everyone. I strongly recommend that if any of that just sounds even a little bit iffy to you, don't pick it up. So as I said earlier, I did give this book a 5 stars. Genuinely, if I could give it 10, I would. I think if you are somebody who likes really detailed character work, really rich character work, and some really interesting intrigue in the background, this is a book that you will really enjoy. The pacing was great. The overall tone of the novel was just excellent. And I just think, guys, like, you gotta go pick it up. Like, if you're liking Parker, if you like Grimdark, if you like character-centric books, if you like all of those things, just go and pick it up, because it is incredible. That I can promise you. And you're gonna read this book and you're going to question certain things about yourself, like I did. That's another thing I love about Parker's works, is that they make you think about your own limits and your own boundaries and what you would be willing to do for the people that you care about and what you would be willing to do in the name of justice. And it's amazing. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I hope you all enjoyed the review. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this review and you're not subscribed, give us a subscribe as well. And do let me know if you have read this book, because right now, Alan and I think, are the only 2 people that have. So anyway, I'm going to stop it here. I hope you all have a lovely day. Stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.